You know what, Annabelle Crabb?
What is it, Lee Sales?
I am still on a high from the Matildas.
Yep. I can't stop thinking about it.
It was so great. And I know I'm not telling the nation anything that everyone else doesn't already know, but it was just really something. And it felt like we just all needed a moment that the whole nation could come around. And I couldn't remember the last time that it felt like that.
Yeah. And, okay, a couple of things. Somebody, Patricia Carvelis this morning sent me a Facebook video of 10 years ago when Sam Kerr scored her first World Cup goal, her first Matildas goal, sorry. And it's so moving because she's so little and she's so thrilled. And you pan around the stadium when they're playing and there's just no crowd. There's nobody there. So empty. And how interesting to watch an old sporting clip and have the most noticeable thing that's changed over 10 years is not how good a player she is, it's how many people have noticed and just gone, oh. And a bit of shout out to a column that a colleague of ours, John Lyons, wrote over the week, sort of bringing together the Matildas and all of these other women in the Australian establishment who are sort of stepping up and taking on the roles for which they are, being recognised for their competence. It is a bit of a moment, I think. But the Matildas, oh my God, I just think it's the character and the spirit in which they play the game.
Yeah.
I loved watching the Optus Sport broadcast because they had just a squad of female commentators who knew exactly what they were talking about, were having a good time. There wasn't any of this sort of like dick-waving nonsense that you sometimes get with male commentators. Sorry, but I mean, they were great male commentators, but like it just didn't have that kind of clubroom feel. It was just all about the joy of the game.
One of the things that amazed me was, so when I was a kid, soccer and cricket were not offered to girls. And it was just watching the level of skill that not just the Australian team, but everyone was playing with. I was just like, why did we ever think girls couldn't play soccer? Like, it's kind of boggles my mind that we had this distinction between, well, these are sports that women can play and that men can play. And it's kind of encouraging to have those moments. Also, the fact that the stadium was full of blokes who were very invested in it. Yeah. So, sometimes you feel like there hasn't been lots of progress made on lots of different social things, and then you see something like that and you go, oh, actually, some progress has been made.
And also that, not just that it's an exhilarating thing to watch, but that it's a business proposition. Like it's obviously massively marketable and profitable. And so, what you would like to see is perhaps some of these women getting paid properly for the work that they do.
The other thing that amazed me was how very rapidly you can get very invested in individual players that you become. So for me,
Mackenzie!
100% Mackenzie Arnold. I was completely, I'm like already have been Googling like, how do I get a Mackenzie Arnold jersey?
Well, you can't because they didn't put one out, which is ridiculous.
I know. She's incredible. And also Mary Fowler was the other one that she was just adorable.
My daughter, Audrey, 16, said to me last night, I just want to be a ball hurtling towards the goal so that Mackenzie Arnold will dive through the air and seize me. I'm like, yes, I also feel like that.
I mean, as you know, I am obsessed by sports psychology. And so in the game where it got to the most unbelievable number of penalties at the end.
Unbearable.
Absolutely unbearable. Because, I mean, one of the beautiful things about sports broadcasting is you get the close-up of people's faces. So you feel almost like you can see what's going through. And I found all of that absolutely fascinating that you could see on the face, like, I don't know her name, but the French girl who kicked the goal really wide and Mackenzie Arnold didn't even have to dive for it. There was something in her face before she even kicked it. And I might have been influenced by the commentary because the commentary also said, that it was her first World Cup game or something like that.
I just bled for her.
Same. But there was something in her face before she even took the kick that I felt like this isn't going to go well.
Interesting.
Yeah,
you are an incredibly experienced sporting observer. Like, I mean, you have a real knack for knowing what's going to happen.
I am an astute student of human nature though. But and then her face, oh my God, when she was almost like, the horror and the disbelief on her face was
But that's the thrill of sport, right? It's that heart in mouth of thinking, well, this is either going to be brilliant or devastating.
Yeah.
And, both possibilities are alive at the same time, which is why it's so gripping.
But then Mackenzie Arnold to have to then like reset every time. So if a goal's got through, you've got to reset. I do not know. I would love to know what you're taught and what goes into your brain to enable you to be able to do that, which brings me to another thing.
Before we leave the Matildas, can I just say another thing that Audrey said to me that I thought, I haven't looked it up like that, but you're absolutely right. So Aud said, look, the cool thing about the Matildas is that Australia is full of people who just got interested in football, and who are just like, oh, this is really fun to watch. And she said, the difference is that you can talk about it to absolutely anybody, and nobody is saying, oh, you only just got interested in football because of the Matildas. There's no kind of you're a forward. It's just full of heaps of women going oh my God, who even am I? I love football now.
Yeah, totally.
And so nobody is being all well, I've been here forever.
Yeah.
Dickheads.
No, it's felt really inclusive. It reminded me a lot of the Sydney Olympics, including with all the community events that people would go to, where there'd be big screens set up in places, and you'd just be bonding with people that you don't even know because of that.
Right, now off you pop on your little digression.
Sports psychology, yes.
Oh, God.
I was waiting for this moment.
Just got to go get a cup of tea.
Okay, so I've mentioned this documentary series before. It's on Netflix. It's called Untold. And I spoke about it with it was a deep dive on how Australia won the America's Cup.
Yeah.
It was brilliantly done.
Oh, God, I still haven't watched that. I have to.
Somebody recommended to me when I said I'd like that, they said, you need to watch Untold Breaking Point. It's incredible. And it really was. So it was a documentary about a tennis player called Marty Fish, who I'd never actually heard of. Had you ever heard of him?
Sounds made up.
He was a really kind of prominent player in the sort of first part of the 2000s. So he went – the video starts with this sporting academy that he and Andy Roddick went to, who used to be the world number one.
Yep. Yes, I have confirmed, heard of him. Just not the fish guy.
This academy was renowned for helping kids achieve mental toughness, and it was about not showing weakness, and
why do I dread this?
And so all of these things about only showing strength, that real kind of hardcore never showing your weakness kind of thing. And I'm just going to open my phone so I got my notes because I don't want to forget a moment of this goodness.
Oh, God.
Anyway, so
now when you're taking notes that you're serious sales mode.
Look at the length of the notes I took on this too.
Might need to incorporate a wee break in here.
For the listeners, it's extensive. It runs to paragraphs. So he, off the back of this camp, goes and lives with the Roddicks, and he and Andy Roddick become really, really close friends. And Andy Roddick's dad is sounds like one of those tennis dads who's really you got to be tough, you got to be strong. It's 4 a.m, kids, get out of bed, get your asses down to the court kind of vibe. Anyway, so he and Andy Roddick are both kind of doing quite well, but then Andy Roddick really kind of rockets up the top of the list, and he's then the world number one.
Oh, and Fish is the world number 50 or something.
Yeah, exactly. And he's not quite got the same killer instinct as Andy Roddick's got. But then Andy Roddick gets a bit sidelined because he has the misfortune to be landing just as Federer, Nadal and Djokovic come into world tennis. And so he kind of rapidly just feels like I just can't do this anymore. So he retires. There's a bit in it actually that almost made me cry where when they're talking about the pressure to perform at that level and the stress, Andy Roddick says to this day there's a kind of sports bar that if he eats gives him a borderline panic attack because he associates the taste of it with that environment. Oh, my God. Anyway, Marty Fish then decides, you know what, I've got one shot at this. I'm going to get really serious. And so he gets this trainer. He absolutely shreds weight, and then he starts rocketing up through the rankings, and he's doing incredibly well, and he's got the killer instinct.
Right.
And he gets to world number 8. And he's kind of the pressure is mounting and things are becoming, really difficult, and he's kind of struggling with it. And then he talks about, as well as just the pressure to perform at this level, he gives an insight into the kind of overthinking that you get into, and it gives you a sense of how maddening it must be. And he's talking about this game where somebody's serving for match point, and he says, so in his head, his thought process is like, okay, well, he knows my forehand's my weak receiving shot for the serve, so he's going to fire it to my forehand. But actually he knows that I'd be thinking that because I also know that my forehand's the weak, so he's probably going to go to the backhand. But then also he would know that I'd be making that calculation. So what he's going to do, he's going to go to the forehand because he'll think that I think he's thinking that, and so he's going to go. And it's like this – it's just an absolute hotbed of anxious thought process, that when you get into this loop. So he's – in this environment all the time, starving basically to be as fit and shredded as he needs to be, and trying to do this kind of killer stuff. And so then what happens is he's made the US Open semi-finals in 2012 playing Roger Federer. Yeah. In the car on the way to the semi-final, he has the most massive, absolute meltdown, breakdown, and he's Googling panic attack, like what can I do, like on the way to the thing, and he's having such a breakdown that his wife says to him, you know, you don't have to actually play. You don't have to go through with it. And so then they cut to the commentators going, we're hearing that Marty Fish has withdrawn from the US Open semi-final. He's not playing. We don't know what's going on. And he pulled out of the US Open semi-final. Jesus. And then he has a complete breakdown and basically just cannot leave his bed and then needs kind of psychological retraining. Like he's in utter acute crisis and basically has to be retrained to get rid of the mentality about never showing weakness that's been drilled in, you know, from childhood. So it was an absolutely fascinating. And then he's come back into tennis. He was like the captain of the US Davis Cup team, but he's come into it with a quite different mindset about how you...
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Yeah. And Andy Roddick, who's in it, they still obviously are good friends. Andy Roddick talks about just not really understanding the mental toll. Because obviously some people, and maybe this is the difference between Novak Djokovic and Marty Fish, maybe some people are just, or Mackenzie Arnold and mere mortals, maybe some people just have more mental capacity to operate under that kind of pressure and that way of being suits them. Or maybe they have different sports, like Ash Barty had a different, helped by mindset coach Ben Crow, had a different philosophy that she brought into it.
Well, her philosophy has been really central to her success, and her philosophy is not about the strength of the individual at all or the bulletproof nature of the individual. She's sort of incorporated failure into her model, which is about being part of a team where you've all kind of got each other's backs, which is like such an interesting approach for such a solo kind of sport, right? Like I think...
But that was the other thing, sorry, just to go back to Matildas. Sorry, no, I'm on a long monologue here. But,
you are. Yeah. But, this is getting towards driving through walnut plantations in California from me, or goose eggs and duck eggs. What are the differences?
I'll never be able to tease you about those things again. The thing with the Matildas game that qualified them for the semis that was so incredible was... It was like it went from a team sport to a one-on-one sport in the extra time. But I still think having your team like on the sidelines there with you, and that if you miss it, they're with you, but if you get it, then they're celebrating with you. I think that probably can't be underestimated. Yeah. And that's why I think the Ash Barty model is super clever, because then you're kind of feeling like it's not just you out there.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think is so nourishing about watching the Matildas is not just watching this bunch of women at the top of their game being, you know, justly appreciated by a huge crowd, but there's something so powerful in the decisions that they're making, and you see that the decisions that they make are always, you know, invariably good. They're sort of sporting there. And it's just that moment where you see Sam Kerr going out through the crowd and she takes her top off and gives it to that kid.
Yeah.
Like that kid's face for me is the image of the tournament. Like it's just, and that's just a decision that Sam Kerr's made to just make that kid's life, you know. And yeah, just anyway, I think they make good decisions. On the tennis front though, I'm sure I've told you before about that film McEnroe and Borg. I think you urgently need to see it. Yeah. So it's a drama, like it's the okay. Yeah. But it basically looks at the backgrounds of McEnroe and Borg, because they were, you know, huge rivals, and they had very, very different demeanours and characters. So Borg was sort of like the ice cool, never lost his cool kind of guy, and McEnroe was obviously pinging around the court like a mad sort of scamp. And what the film explores is the fact that up until he was about 15, Borg was exactly the same. But was then trained to turn his anger and rage inwards and to present an outwardly calm front, and to use his temper to like express it in excellence in tennis rather than, you know,
an outward
losing
explosion.
His shit. And Borg also channeled all of this nervous energy into maintaining patterns of behaviour that were the same every time he went to Wimbledon. So like he would absolutely ensure that he would, every Wimbledon that he played at, he would stay in the same hotel, in the same room. He had this routine that he would do the night before he played where he'd go through like 30 rackets and, you know, do this sort of real routine. He'd always fly his parents over. He'd always wear the same shirt on the plane, I think.
Yeah, right. I did some research on exactly this in Any Ordinary Day, and it's a thing. It's very common to people who have a line of work that has a lot of luck involved in the outcome. So sailors, elite sports people, performers, surgeons, anything that involves a degree of farmers. I'm not sure.
Bit of luck in farming.
I'm sure. No, it's where because humans are hardwired we like certainty. And so you're hardwired to try to have
maximize the
control
certainty,
and certainty. And so when it's something that you really have very little control over how you're going to play on any given day, and is McEnroe just going to get a ball in by an extra millimetre? So that's a method of trying to impose certainty on an environment that's fundamentally uncertain.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess.
And it worked for him. It does work for you because what it does is it soothes your brain.
It gives you an impression of control. Well, it seems to for him. Anyway, fascinating film. I think you would really get into it because you're such a sport head, as we all are now.
Who would have thought that the pattern of this podcast would be from me going from lengthy monologues about music theory into lengthy monologues about sports psychology?
I know, it's been seamless. And the only real, I just really wish that the Women's World Cup had not ended with that Spanish football chief kissing that player. Like, did you see this? So the head of football for Spain, I can't remember his name, I wrote it down, was congratulating the winning team, and he pulls this player into him, can't remember her name either, sorry everybody, and he puts his hand on the back of her head and he kisses her on the mouth.
Oh. Are they in a relationship?
No.
Oh.
And she's interviewed afterwards and she goes, no, I didn't like that. And then he's sort of apologised, and now she's apologised to him, and, you're so amazing. And I just think, guys, really? Why would you take something that we've all been enjoying and make it gross?
I didn't see that.
Don't do it. Yeah, it's foul. It's just like, I mean, I saw the footage and just went, oh, my God, who is that guy? But
hence me asking if they were going out, because I can't really imagine a scenario in which you'd do that to someone unless they were your actual partner.
Not doing it even a little bit.
I feel a bit like this year has been kind of the rise of the unexpected female role models, because the other people who I feel like came out of nowhere and that the whole country kind of embraced them was Gina Chick and Kate Grayrock, who were so amazing on Alone Australia, surviving in the wilderness, doing stuff that traditionally people think of as men. Alone, every other season of Alone, and there's been a squillion of them overseas, have been won by men.
Really?
And then this unbelievable woman comes along and just blows everyone out of the water with her extraordinary resilience. Yeah. She is Australian Stories back this week, and Gina Chick is...
You got Gina?
Yes.
Oh.
And we're also doing, I think by the time this episode goes out, it'll either be on iView or about to land on iView. We're doing this one-off special called Australian Story Live, where we've got an audience of people coming.
Just so you can be in a room with Gina?
Exactly. Oh, I have manufactured this whole thing. We're having a screening of, and tickets are already gone, so don't look for them. We're having a screening of Australian Story in a cinema, the Palace Cinema, and there's an audience of people who are coming to watch that, and then Gina and I are having a half-hour conversation.
How cool, because often when I watch Australian Story, I do want to know what they thought, because Australian Story, I mean, I make Kitchen Cabinet on air Tuesdays at 8 p.m. And we spend one day with our guest because we can't get any more. So it's a big day, but we make half an hour of television in one day. Whereas Australian Story follows them around for
weeks.
Yeah. And you just get these beautiful little moments. But then sometimes if your subject has been done all of this filming and, hours and hours and hours, they really don't know what the final thing is going to look like.
No, that's it. Although one of the things that I find great about working on that show is how much care the producers put into liaising with the talent about the finished product and how, to make them comfortable and to ensure that they're okay. But nonetheless, it must be full on, because also you're hearing other people talk about you.
Which like going to your own funeral in a way.
Yeah. So anyway,
So you're going to do more live things?
I'd like to. We're dipping a toe in the water with this. It's going to be recorded and then turned around and put onto iView. So you'll be able to watch.
Oh, so we can watch it.
Yeah, so you'll be able to watch the Gina episode of Australian Story and then the Australian Story Live with me and
then
Gina.
You're going to watch her attempting to use her MacGyver skills to get out of the theatre before you just...
Do you know what? I'm scared she's going to...
Spanish football chiefer.
I'm scared she's going to lock me in front of the room into having to go on some hike and to, build my own fire and stay in a tent and be left alone.
You lied about being the outdoor type, police sales.
That's right. It's somebody else who I was talking to about nature said, because I was like, oh, wouldn't you be, because Gina does this thing where she takes people out and they get left alone in the wilderness overnight. And I was thinking, but if I was out in the bush all night, I don't reckon I'd sleep a wink, because I'd be thinking I'd be hearing every noise. And someone said to me, you actually get over that pretty fast.
Yeah. I used to, so I grew up on a farm, as you know, and I went to a slumber party once when I was about 9, and it was in the early days of video recorders, and my host's parents had hired a video recorder so that we could watch a movie, and they'd hired American Werewolf in London.
Oh,
and I'd never seen a horror movie before. In fact, I didn't even know what a horror movie was. So I'm like, la, 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 la. Oh, they're in a pub. All right, now they're walking in the what? And then I ran out and I dived under the bed of Juliet, my school friend, and I stayed there for almost the entire movie. I was just like, what just happened? I was so frightened. And after that, it used to be my job to go and shut the chooks up at dusk, and so that was quite a walk away. And I was just convinced that there were werewolves that would come out and maul me. And years I was scared of noises.
So you wouldn't be able to go out into the bush because you
because I'd expect,
was going to get you. Even though there are no werewolves in Australia, but still.
Not that we know of.
That was the exact same thing happened to me. And Jill, if you're listening, thanks for scarring me.
Which movie was it?
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh,
where
no.
Jill invited me over and we watched Nightmare on Elm Street when we were about 13. And I couldn't have a bubble bath without expecting giant knives to come out.
Absolutely.
And frequently I'd be lying on my bed at night and I'd feel like I've got to open my eyes just to check there's no knives coming out of the mattress. It was, horror movies, not good for children.
No,
who would have thought?
Exactly. I'm amazed it took us so long to get onto that.
Now, while we're talking about amazing chicks, because this episode seems to have morphed into something about amazing chicks, I went to a fantastic art exhibition on the weekend that's in Sydney at the National Art School by an artist called Elizabeth Cummings.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right.
I don't know very much about visual art, so I don't quite have the language to
explain.
But I know what I like. The use of colour.
But you're good at explaining everything else. Like why it's funny. I always think it's interesting when people get so nervous about talking about art. Like there's a special language or code that, you think you're going to stuff up by even opening your mouth. But it's so weird because you are interested in a million different things and you never hesitate to offer an opinion on fucking anything sport, entomology. Yeah, roll up my sleeves. I'm in there. But art, you're like, well, I don't know what I'm talking about. But you do because you go to art exhibitions all the time.
I just like looking at it, but I don't.
I just like looking at it, says Lee Sales.
Because I don't
just
know.
The entire point.
Because I don't know anything about the process. I feel like I can bring less analysis as to why something works. Whereas with a piece of music, I can go, well, I think it works because of this, or the theme music succession works for the following reasons. Okay, so all I can really say to you about the Elizabeth Cummings
is you like the way it looks.
I like the way it looks, and I think that the use of colour is incredibly creative and really masterful. And it's one of those things where there's colours that are put together that you just would feel like, oh, wow, I can't understand how they work together, but nonetheless, that looks really pleasing to my eye. And also, strangely, it evokes some kind of emotional response.
Right.
So there's obviously something about it that's very powerful and very masterful because it just works.
Right. Magic.
That's all I can say.
Like magic.
It's magic. Anyway, it's great. And the National Art School, I've been to a few things there, and I think they do a brilliant job of curating their exhibitions, but also
you get to wander around. The National Art School is basically it's a former women's convict, prison.
Yeah.
And the buildings are incredible.
Yeah, it's heritage listed. The building that they've got this exhibition in and that I've seen other ones in is this circular kind of tower-like building. Anyway, it's a fantastic
They
facility.
do great exhibitions of artists, of graduating artists. Their graduating art show is really good. I go every year.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. So I highly recommend that.
Can I just, now that I think of it, actually, there's the Sydney Contemporary Art Fair is coming up as well. So if you're in Sydney, I go to that every year because it's just, it's like a million art galleries in one. So it's at Carriage Works.
Right.
And all of the major galleries will have a stand there. And so it's like a tasting plate. You can wander around and, there's stuff that's $1 billion and there's stuff that's $200. And you can buy it, but I don't always buy something. I'm just there.
Having a look around.
Yeah. So it's 7th to the 10th of September at Carriage Works. It's a really good day out even like I take my kids and just wander around and just notice what they get drawn to.
Do you know one of my favourite things when I go to an art show or even just to a gallery is if I'm with a friend, I'll always go, okay, let's go around and pick the one painting that you would like to take home if you can take any one painting home. I love doing that.
I remember going to the Sydney Contemporary Art Fair, and that's where I bought that Honor Freeman ceramic work, which is one of my favourite things in my life. But I remember going to a gallery stand, and there was a fresh Cressida Campbell that had just arrived, and it was still a bit wet.
Oh.
I'm like, oh. And anyway, it cost more than my car, so I might just have to look at it and absolutely not touch it.
It's one of the things I think when we talked about the Cressida Campbell at the National Gallery, which is one of their most successful, if not the most successful thing ever. I loved that. Actually, the Elizabeth Cummings exhibition has this too, but I love those videos that actually show the person doing something so you can see the craft. And the Cressida Campbell one, it's just her process is just mind-blowing.
And so, I mean, talking about nerve-wracking, because she sort of hand paints each woodcut and then takes a piece of paper and puts it on the top and then peels it off. And if it's worked, it's worked.
It's like a bungee
And if it doesn't, it doesn't.
I wonder if she has to do the full Bjorn Borg, like I'm wearing my special shirt today and
She's definitely got a special shirt.
Room
I've got 30 tennis rackets lined up in a special order before I unpeel the thingo. I had one more thing actually while we're talking about, chicks ruling. The two Kates, McCartney and McLennan. I always go to say McClymont, but like she's a totally different Kate. It's like, imagine if you put them all three together and they just did like terrifying mobsters and comedy. I think it would work. Anyway.
McLennan and McCartney,
So a couple of months ago, the show Deadloch went to where I think it was on Prime, is on Prime. And I kind of started watching it, but I was so busy and also really sad that I sort of didn't get into it properly. And now I'm right into it. I'm just loving it. It's like, it's so funny and kooky, and it's set in Tassie, was shot in Tassie. And Kate Box, who is the lead, who's the local cop who's investigating, these mysterious murders or whatever, is so great. I love her. She's really awesome. And she's got this offsider played by Nina Oyama, who's kind of like the junior cop who's sort of bumbling around. But like Nina is such a great actor. She's a really good comedian, but just the most lovely screen energy. That sort of like tentative Office Junior kind of thing. Anyway, I'm really liking it, and I kind of feel like I've missed the boat a bit because I'm only watching it now, but like it's great and I recommend it.
Speaking of cops bumbling around, did they ever get to the bottom of who did the poo at that wedding, that podcast you listened to? Did you get to the end of it?
I'm not at the end of it yet, and I don't know, but my sister-in-law Margot is sending me sort of hilarious updates. But yeah.
I don't really want to hear the whole thing, but I just do want to know how that poo got on the floor. So
I've got my suspicions.
If you can just do like a Crabb hot take or whatever we call those little quick shot or whatever those things are called that we do where you give
as soon as the poo is located.
Let me know.
I'll be right back to you.
Before we wrap it up,
that podcast is Who Shat on the Floor at My Wedding,
that's right.
Which is by a hilarious New Zealand team.
I love how anyone just randomly listened to this because I didn't give the context would have just gone, who? What? Someone pooed at the floor at someone that Crabb and Sells at No's wedding.
Yeah, that's why I thought I'd provide a little context. And also, it's nothing to do with poo drops, which are available on our website, chat10looks3.com, that Gwen designed. Who even are we?
Who even are we? Before we wrap, just one more thing about some interesting chicks. I listened to an episode of this podcast called Tough Love that's hosted by Linda Marigliano. Is that how you pronounce her name?
I don't know.
Some people might say Marigliano, but
it's got a G as in
because it's Italian.
Marigliano.
Yeah.
Okay,
Linda Marigliano.
I think you've nailed that. Thank you. Sorry, Linda.
It's called Tough Love, and I just listened to one episode because I heard a clip from it that my friend Kumi Taguchi posted on her Instagram, and it was Kumi Taguchi and Beck Lucas.
Okay, I like Beck Lucas.
That is the whole reason basically I'm raising it, because I just really find Beck Lucas funny and clever and engaging. I think she's great. But also Kumi, they're just talking about, general life stuff and challenges. And Kumi is one of those people who I always find really emotionally intelligent and insightful, and is one of those people I feel like in a different life we could have been best friends, but now we're just too busy. And so every time I cross paths with Kumi and we have a catch up, I'm like, I really want us to have more time together. And then invariably we both just accept that that's not possible. And we go, well, this 3 hours that we spent together has been awesome.
Right.
I hope we can do it again soon.
I'm a bit like that with Julia Baird because I don't get much time with her, but every now and again we just find some time. Like we had this great thing where we drove for about 5 hours to go to a friend of ours' birthday sort of holiday weekend, and it was the greatest 5 hours. We just absolutely talked and talked and talked and talked. And like sometimes it's great to have a friend like that by the time you finally get together, you're just bursting with things to say.
And also that
it's not like you where I just bored of you within 10 minutes because of like,
and also where you just know that there's no expectations that one party's not going to kind of want more than the other because both parties accept that it is what it is kind of thing.
And you just take the joy where you find it.
Yeah. I reckon one of the really fun things in life actually is if you show up to a dinner or just sitting on a train or something and you get chatting to somebody and you have a really great connection, but you know that you're going to pass like ships in the night because you just happen to be on the train between New York and Washington and you're never going to see each other again, but it was just great for the 3 hours while it lasted. It's lovely.
Or that thing where you go to a party or some gathering that's a bit boring or something and then you see across the room someone that you hardly ever see and you're like, this just got 10 times better. Virginia Gay's like that. Like not that she ever goes to a boring party, but like, you know, I always think, well, this just got 30% more fun, 50, 70, I don't know, lots more fun. I can see that you're winding me. All right then. So don't forget Perth. Also, we're coming to Melbourne.
Perth show first. Did we talk about Perth show?
I think we might have. Yeah, it's the
28th of October. Perth.
28th of October.
Perth Shatters. I love doing the Perth show. It's one
so
of my favourites. The audience is always really
warm
up. And they always have the vibe that they've had like, you know, 3 beers each before they've got to the show, which I really like. Last time they were yelling out about us going to Gnomesville. And
that's right.
It was great.
And that was a good tip because we went to Gnomesville. It was awesome.
There was something that everyone, when we said we were going to go to such and such a place, they all just burst out laughing. Was that Gnomesville?
Yeah, it was
something
Gnomesville.
else. Yeah.
I think it was Gnomesville.
And then Melbourne on the 13th of October, which we're very excited about. So
Hamer Hall, yeah.
That's also always a brilliant show.
Yeah, we're working on some very cool little special bits.
I feel like our Melbourne peeps are just such book reading. You know, they just feel like they're right into the vibe.
Where they show up.
Exactly. Anyway, we'll see you all soon.
Okay, see ya.